So next up is just identifying a claim. Sometimes you'll ask for like a general topic, but we really want to focus on a question, like a discussion question, which is making a claim of like, yes, this thing is true, or no, this thing is not true. So a good thing to do is just asking for a claim. Here's the first step. Anything else about this, Robert, to set up?
No, I think you basically want to get a sense of the claim. This is, as I said before, being on the same page. So you want to just know where they're coming from.
Mm-hmm. Here's some examples.
What belief do you have that you really think is true that we can explore by me asking questions to see how you concluded that it's actually true?
I'm a Christian, and I love Jesus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So any topic, and you're good with any topic?
Ideally, these conversations are more interesting when you pick something that you think is true and it motivates you to behave differently because you think that it's true. Mm-hmm. So you might arrange your furniture in a way because you think that it's going to give you good vibes.
Oh, okay. Okay. Then I would say, I'm a Christian, and I would say my worldview is a stronger worldview than any other worldview.
We can pretty much talk about any claim. However, it's ideal if it's a claim that you make because you're fairly sure that it's true. And then you find yourself acting out on it. Like you might donate to a candidate because you like her position on this thing, or you're going to actually go to that particular building and pray to a higher power because you're sure that God is real. Something along those lines.
Okay.
What type of claim do you find yourself making because you think that it's true?
I'm a Christian. I believe there's God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep, there you go. And I posted a link to this keynote if you want to download it and watch the videos later. So yeah, pretty straightforward. Asking for a claim. Although, once you get a claim, maybe it's not so straightforward. Maybe there's some words you're not familiar with. Maybe it's like super long. They took like 5 minutes to explain what the claim is, but you really want to repeat back and clarify and get it down to like a simple one sentence thing or tweet size type claim.
I think I just quickly mentioned that you need to be prepared to be neutral and respectful when your interlocutor makes a claim. Remember that these people who have thought of their belief, have thought it through, feel that they're reasonable in their belief. They don't believe their belief is in any way necessarily controversial. So be respectful of that, and so you can engage them at a peer-to-peer level.
Yeah, and you'll see some examples of particular claims here. So here's some examples.
Can you tell me what you mean by karma? Like what?
If you do good things will happen to you.
Okay. So is karma only limited to good things?
No, also bad things. Like if you're an evil person, it'll eventually catch up to you.
Okay. So karma is when bad or good things. Bad or good. Equity.
Or the illusion of equity.
Before we go any further, I want to totally understand what your definition of equity is. And then maybe we can get into your claim about it. I want to make sure that we're on the same page.
Okay.
What does equity mean? Spirits, then, for me to understand exactly what you mean by spirit, are you saying that there are entities that are observing us and then interacting with us?
Yes.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay, so you saw many examples in this video of clarifying the claim in the form of asking for definitions of terms if people are using words in a very particular kind of way. This is quite common in terms of clarifying a claim. It's not the only way in which you can clarify a claim. Sometimes claims can be worded in a kind of vague kind of way. So you'll need to focus and drill down on vaguely worded statements and see if you can elicit from them a kind of a knowledge statement, a statement which would unpack to something like, I believe it is true that ... You want to get some kind of knowledge statement.
Yep.
Klaus has got a question about that, actually.
Oh, yeah. Klaus asks, have you come across people who hate giving numbers? I can think of a few people in my life I've done this with without realizing, and they would hate to give exact numbers. Yeah. We don't force people to give, the 0 to 100 or 1 to 7. They can give more, descriptive, ways of giving their confidence. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, you can have high, medium, low, and of course, Reid, in your videos, you have this little scale that goes back and forth, that goes from gray, from white through gray to black. It's a kind of a shades of gray scale, and so it's non-numeric. It's just a relative number to give people a sense of context.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, sometimes the interlocutor responds. They are immovable with regards to the claim. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, and the response you get, depending on, if they're 100 or 99, those two numbers are like vastly different kinds of conversations you'll be getting yourself into just based on that slight, difference. And, definitely 50 is different than 75 and 80. And you can gauge where you're going to go in the conversation based on this one technique, and you use this number in other techniques later on, and reviewing it later at the end. And we're right on time, going on to the next one. Street epistemology is helping people think through ways to test their claims, their beliefs. And first is to ask even the question: is this belief or is this claim testable? But people don't really know what that means, so it's good to clarify and make sure what we are asking is actually clear, and what we're asking is clear. Yeah. Go ahead, Robert.
You also want to be on the same page as to what constitutes a test, or what constitutes a fair test, and do tests have pass fail capability? What would it take to reconsider a belief? You're looking at a level of openness to encountering other kinds of possibilities here. So, how could you see something like that belief in a different light, or what would you need to see to revise your belief? These kinds of things explore the concept of how flexible and open they are to these kinds of possibilities.
Yep. And after that, of asking if it's testable, you try to ask for specific methods of testing the claim, and here are some examples of them.
What would the test look like? What?
Yeah, what would it look like?
You're just a cruel man, Reid. You're a cruel man. What would a test be? What would it look like if there was a test to see if God was real?
Mm-hmm.
No, Reid, you can't. No. I don't know why you're sending me down. I'm going to start cussing. No, it's just sending me down frustration lane. No.
Faith is hope in what we can't see, and it's similar to the wind. Is faith, as it relates to your belief, equally demonstrable as the wind? Like, for example, I see the wind hitting your hair. I feel it on my skin. We might be able to construct a test to show that there's some force moving on a piece of paper or something. Are we able to detect and test faith as it relates to your certainty that this God is actually real?
There you go. So sometimes people give faith as a way to test the claim that a God exists. And is faith a fair test for that claim? Like, if you have faith, is that just a positive result? So how is this related to testing the claim? And there's other ways of testing people give. So it's a great way to go.
Yeah, I agree that some people have given some thought to the testability of their claim. Other people haven't. And for some who have, they're quite comfortable with the idea that their claim is not testable. They feel that an untestable claim places them in some kind of bulletproof, unassailable position, and not recognizing that bulletproof position could be that they're mistaken and may remain mistaken for the rest of their life. And so they have to recognize that these things are a double-edged sword. So there are ways to kick out of this closed loop that people are in, but it takes an element of kind of epistemic humility and openness to belief change. Tests that can't discriminate between success and failure, correct or incorrect, true or false, are not actually tests, right? But what would a test be measuring if it can't discriminate between these two things? Recognize that people who attempt to go through the motions of a testing like behavior recognize that they're not actually testing or measuring anything. They're really actually trying to confirm what they believe to start with.
Yeah, which relates to, confirmation bias. People mostly just seek out evidence to confirm whatever they want to believe, and they don't have, the highest standards for those things. Or if they find, something that they think is bad, that people shouldn't believe, they'll ask themselves like, well, can I even believe this? And they'll, just try to confirm even just the lowest standard thing to dismiss it. But ideally, we want to be able to, have rigorous standards for whatever the claim is, and actually, go through an objective process of testing reality to see whatever we're trying to figure out is actually the case without as much bias as possible.
So for me, basically, as Anthony said, it's a way to speak to other people that prioritizes rapport and relationship. That's the most important thing for me. It helps us both to clarify what we mean by the words that we're using, so we're not talking past each other, understand the reasons we have for the beliefs that we hold, and to identify if we're thinking accurately about those reasons. Now, as Anthony said, it's not about telling people what our view is or debating or arguing with them. It's really about asking respectful and friendly questions with consent to really understand how other people think and to help us both discover if we have reliable ways to know what's true. So it's a bit like a partnership or a joint venture. We're exploring this honestly together. I think it's even more important these days with the amount of information that's just thrown at us through the internet and social media, because if we don't know how to think accurately about what to accept as true and what to reject as false, if we've never been taught that in a reliable way to work that out, then we've really lost our freedom to think and be in control. And the problem doesn't really stop there, because if we're relying on that same faulty process to form beliefs about other things as well, then how many untrue things might we end up believing in and feeling emotional about and making decisions about that impact not only our life, but the lives of the people closest to us who we care deeply about. So I see street epistemology as really an effective teaching tool that not only helps others, but also helps ourselves to correct that faulty critical thinking process, which in turn helps us to correct all the other false beliefs that we have as well. So that's what I think street epistemology is all about, just to contextualize it for me. Kevon, do you have any thoughts on that?
I would agree. I would agree with everything you just said. Just also add that it's just a method of getting beyond arguing. I don't think does arguing ever really work. You never get anywhere. You never accomplish anything. You're just talking at each other instead of listening and trying to figure out like the heart of the matter, trying to figure out what someone believes and why, and moving forward. I think it's a better way to communicate than just screaming at each other.
These are common ones I come across with identity triggers, relationship triggers, and truth triggers, and they can trigger defensiveness in people. So, for example, with identity, we all like to feel that we're intelligent in our own way, that we're good and decent, and that we're autonomous, that we're not being controlled or manipulated by others. And if we're making statements about what we think is true, instead of being neutral and just asking questions, especially if the relationship is already a bit rocky, right? Or we lack credibility, or what we say seems a bit off, then it can cause our conversation partner to feel like, oh, they should be on guard a bit, or especially if what we're saying says something about who they are, and this causes them to feel not accepted or not appreciated, then this is what ends up causing people to be defensive, to double down, get stuck in escalating arguments and debates. So we don't want that. What we really want instead is calm, honest reflection from both of us as friends, really, to discuss what's really true. Kevon, do you have like one conversation that comes to mind where you found yourself struggling to be in control of any of these triggers? Anything you can share?
Yeah, I had a conversation last year. We were talking. The conversation was about what to do with sex offenders once they've been released from prison, and it's obviously it's the type of issue that can get heated, and this tends to not be a simple answer. And yeah, it got to the point where ego did get in the way. Like the thing that I always like to remind people is that everyone believes they're right. No one has a position and says, yeah, I'm wrong. Like everyone always thinks if they're telling you they have a belief, that's what they believe is right. So you can't just go at it and say, oh, you're wrong or whatever. They hold this position because in their mind, in their heart, they believe that they are correct. So you need to come at it from a different direction and not just scream at each other.
Hey, did you notice that emotion as it was arising in you, or did you notice after the fact that that turned into a debate?
I noticed as it was happening, but this was, and this is what I find with SE. This was someone I had a personal relationship with, so it was a bit difficult. I'm not the most seasoned SE practitioner, so especially with a stranger or even with a friend, it's one thing, but in a more intimate relationship, it can definitely get more heated.
Yeah, absolutely. SE is. I would say the toughest SE conversations I have are the ones with family, because they know who you are. They take liberties with the sort of insults that they let fly. So that's always the toughest one.
Well, essentially with confidence level, you just want to gain an understanding of how much they believe in this, like how does this affect their life? Like what is the degree to which this impacts them? What is their level of belief? Like, is this something casual? Is this something that actively they take part in every day? This is a belief that drives all of their actions. Some of their actions, does this sort of play into how their job, their relationships with others? You want to just gauge how important this is to them.
To be as efficient as possible, we want to ask questions like, what would be your top 2 or 3 reasons that give you such confidence? If you were to pie chart this out, for example, what reason would be the biggest slice? And it helps us to hone in on, if you were to discover this was no longer true, would you still have such a high confidence level? And if it's no, then we'll go into that next, real reason check. But the whole purpose of this is we want to be having this conversation around their main reasons, because that's the most efficient and effective way to really honestly explore if we have reliable ways to know what's true. Things to avoid, just be careful about yes or no questions. We want to ask what and how, just open questions, get them to talk openly. And like I said before, be careful of decoys. A lot of people will have reasons that are just like leaves, on branches of a tree. We want to get to the root core of the belief, the trunk. We want to get to the main one, not these ones that are leaves that are out there that don't really have much of an impact on their belief. We've got a couple of go-to favorites that we use to really get people thinking about how reliable the methods are that they use. The first one we've got here is defeasibility and disconfirmation. So once we've questioned the quality of the test, there's this other way that we do it. So do we have any way to bring our confidence down is at the heart of this. So there are 2 things here. One is falsifiability, and the second one is disconfirmation criteria. So with falsifiability, we're looking at, can we imagine the opposite of this? What would the opposite look like? And what could we see to show that the opposite is true? The other one is disconfirmation criteria, which is, does this test at least have a failure to it? Like, if there's no way of noticing a negative result, are we just at risk of repeating confirmation bias, always just getting an A+ on the test? Okay, Kevon, do you want to talk a little bit about the outsider test and how this can help us to raise awareness?
I love the outsider test. This is one of my favorite parts. It goes towards sort of empathy, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. Essentially, now that we've questioned whether the method that relied on can ever show that they're wrong, the outsider test is a way of showing reliability. Essentially, we're asking them to view their beliefs from the lens of someone else, someone who isn't convinced of the belief. Essentially, if 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 someone had never heard of this, if they're completely unfamiliar with it, what do you think they would think? It gets them to put themselves in someone else's shoes, and I think this is one of the best parts that really gets people thinking.
Well, imagine if someone's been a priest their whole life, their whole source of income comes from this career, and then all of a sudden they start questioning their belief. That would be a huge barrier. There's a huge net cost to honestly looking at that. Where would they be without that? So some tips and approaches. When we discover what that is, sometimes we don't always discover. One sort of question I can use to work out whether this is a problem is, I might ask something like, how does this belief benefit you in a practical sense? Or if hypothetically, not saying this is true, but if hypothetically you discovered a few years from now that this was not true, what sort of impact would that have in your life? For example, do you think you would still be a good person? We get them talking. We're using lots of what questions here and how, because we want them to talk honestly about how they're seeing this. And then if we do discover that, this is a real concern for them, then this is something that we need to focus on, because all the rest of the conversation won't go anywhere unless we address this underlying, this is like a deeper underlying root cause, or like in that analogy of the tree that I gave, where the beliefs are on the leaves, on the branches. These sort of motivations are the trunk of the tree, so we want to spend time addressing this before we talk about anything else, because if we don't get over this barrier, then nothing else is really going to be helpful, if this is what they genuinely want.
Like one example I gave previously was I was speaking to a former coworker about ghosts, and she said she believed in ghosts, and she wasn't a Christian, but she said she believed in ghosts. And I asked her, why do you believe in ghosts? And she said, because she's seen them. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And I'm like, but you don't believe in God, but you think that like our consciousness survives after we die. How is that? And she explained to me that she believes that our consciousness is not in our brain. And so I pushed back on that and said, okay, then why do you think it is that when someone has a brain injury, their consciousness changes? And she really thought about that. And I just let that sit. And because for her, she'd never thought of that. To her, the whole thing had all made sense. But yeah, and I didn't push after that. I just let it sit.
It was around 2016, around the election, and I was feeling kind of low, and I wanted to do something. I wanted to feel like could do something to change the predicament we were in. And, my old way of debating people didn't seem to be working out so well. And I was trying to find a way to have these discussions with people who have maybe diametrically opposed beliefs than me in a healthy way, because we seem to be living in a polarized society where we can't even talk about this kind of stuff without it, without tempers flying and things like that. And so that's really how I got interested in street epistemology. And I saw some of Anthony's videos, but really it was actually Reid Nicewonder's videos. And as soon as I saw a few of those videos, it clicked for me. It made complete sense. And I just, so much to the point where I started my own podcast, and I do SE myself. If a belief can't be shown to be false, then there's no way to know that it's really true. Because I can believe anything and it's true, because no one can show me otherwise. And a lot of beliefs do fall under this umbrella. So basically what I'm doing here is I really need to understand his belief claim. And I'm going to spend some time, sometimes I don't need to spend much time, but sometimes I need to spend a lot of time really understanding the belief claim, because we got to be talking about the same thing. And if he's talking about one belief and I'm just assuming he's talking, and I was assuming the wrong thing. I was assuming that there is an actual flying spaghetti monster in space that is a god. I was incorrect. So I really need to understand what the belief claim is, because if you're talking about two different things, you're not going to get too far that way. And so I spent some time doing that. It helps with the street epistemology, but even better, it helps with the rapport, because the person really does feel heard if you're telling them hey, he's really asking me questions about my belief, and it really sounds like at this point he really gets it. So typically, what happens is when you're having a real life conversation with someone like you as your old self, we'd come up with a test, like a legitimate test. So a truly legitimate test, like if in the sense that if we had a lab test the blood and test the wine and the bread, and if the test came back and it said, all this bread and blood has AB blood type, I would have to rethink my belief about this, because I think, wow, you mean this independent company did this test and there's a blood type, they were able to blood type bread and wine? Like, I would have to accept that my belief could very well be incorrect. And that's part of street epistemology, is to be able to put your belief out there that you might be saying things incorrectly. And if you're willing to accept that makes what you're doing so much better. And the person you're talking to will definitely see that if you're willing to change your belief, if it needs to be changed. And I'm a little confused, so help me out. So UFO, I think, means unidentified. So they're identifying something as unidentified?
Yes, but we all know that means aliens.
How does one identify something as being unidentified? How does it help me? I'm just trying to understand the belief.
Well, because they don't know, they can't, it doesn't fit into any of the criteria for airplanes that we know about currently. It does things that airplanes are not known to do.
If we don't have an explanation for a belief, for something that we're observing, how does not knowing something make another thing more likely to be true? The logic behind it is that sometimes people will say that they believe it because it can't be understood. And it's sort of the gods of the gap argument,
right?
That we don't know something, and because we don't know something, that necessarily means that it's God or it's Jesus or it's Allah. You know what I mean? And that's something that we would need to work out. That it's okay not to know something, but does not knowing something make this other thing more true? It's possible it could, but we need to talk through that as well. So the belief is, and we can pretend you have the belief, that when you die, you're going to a better place.
Right.
Is this
yes.
Is this place heaven? I mean, it's not Walmart. I mean, it's just like a nice where is this place?
Yeah, it's not Walmart. This place is heaven.
Heaven. So when you die, you go to a place called heaven, and heaven is is heaven. I guess is a good place where you get reunited with people, and it seems like it's a pretty special place to be.
Yes.
On a scale from 1 to 7, how confident are you that this belief is true?
Well, I'm thinking of her.
Yeah,
it would be a 7. It would be a 7.
And on a scale from 1 to 7, how confident are you? I'm sorry, on a scale from 1 to 7, how important is it for you to believe in true things?
I would say she would say 7 to that as well. Yes.
How do you know that this belief is true?
Yeah, that's what I asked her. And she said, I don't have to have any evidence because I have faith.
Okay, great. This is awesome. This is awesome. Faith. Oftentimes, at the end of a conversation, we'll end up with faith. It's very important to discuss the person's definition of faith, because faith can mean a whole lot of things. Faith can mean evidence. It could mean a belief without evidence. It could mean trust. People have all sorts of ways they describe what faith means. So I would want to know what faith means to you. Could you tell me what faith means?
I'm thinking how she would answer this. I would say faith means believing in something without needing evidence to prove it, knowing in your heart, in your soul, that it is true.
Okay, so faith is knowing something in your heart is true without evidence for that being true. Is that right? No.
Yes.
How do you know things where there is no evidence for that thing being true?
That's a great question. And I wish I would have asked her that. I don't know. Let's see. She would probably say, I just know. I just have faith. It is something that I feel in my heart is real and true. And, it's just a lot of that stuff.
Back to my thought experiment we talked about before with Buddy Holly. What if I told you that I believe Buddy Holly was a musician, he died, he rose, he's a god now. I have faith that Buddy Holly is a god. What does that say about Buddy Holly being a god?
Well, everybody knows that Buddy Holly was a human being who did rock and roll music and passed away. And so, but he didn't rise. Jesus rose. That's what she'd say.
Well, so you're telling me with my belief that where Buddy Holly didn't rise, this is my belief and I do believe it, that's not true, but your belief where Jesus rose, that is true.
It reduces belief to opinion.
How could we, that's a good point. It seems like that we have two beliefs that are at odds at each other. How could we find out what is objectively true, universally true? If Jesus rose and is a god, I'd like to believe it. If Buddy Holly rose and he's a god, I'd like to believe that. How could we find out, putting those two beliefs side by side, the truth? What test could we do to figure that out?
Well, I would say that your belief that Buddy Holly is a god is not like my belief that God is a god, because Buddy Holly, everyone knows. I mean, that's just silly. She would say you're just being silly and making something up that's totally not believable.
Well, but you're telling me that my belief is not believable. What if someone told you that your belief was not believable? How would that feel to you?
I would feel like I was being discounted, that my beliefs were being discounted.
Yeah, right. So let's just assume that I believe my belief and I think it's real, and you believe your belief and you think it's real. And let's think about this objectively. As there's a third person sitting across the room and they just want to know what's true. They'll believe Buddy Holly is a god if Buddy Holly is a god, and they'll believe that Jesus is a god if Jesus is a god. What could we do? Is there any test? Is there a way we could set this up to find the truth value of one belief over the other belief? Because it doesn't seem like both could be true.
So if we had a third person, you're saying if we had a third person and you needed to explain your belief to this person,
the third person just wants to know what's true, and they're asking our help. They're asking our help to help them figure out what's true. What information could we give them? And so
That's good.
Yeah. And so, of course, there's probably not too much information. That's the conundrum.
Yeah.
And you're exposing them to this paradox. You're exposing them to this conundrum. You're not telling them the conundrum. That won't work.
Right.
You're having them think about it. And you're having them discover critical thought on their own. You're not telling them how to do critical thought. They're doing it. You've just allowed them to make a big step because they're trying to hold two diametrically opposed views in their hand at the same time, and they can't. They think this one's true and this one's not true, but they can't tell you why. And they can't think of a good reason why that would be. They're on the road. And that's street epistemology.
You've heard in the main room why to do street epistemology and what the goals of SE can be. And I want to crash right now into the practical how. This is my dangerously oversimplified street epistemology checklist. This came out of a conversation I had with Anthony once when I was trying to build this, and he kept warning me, okay, yeah, we can talk about it like it's a checklist, but it's not rigid like that. It's nothing, it's a lot more fluffy. There's a lot more variability from day to day. So we're going to go through this today as if it were a rigid checklist. And there's a lot of places in which you might do things in a different order or whatever. And that's all correct, usually, All right.
Awesome. So, hey, Dali. We're already friends, so let's pretend that I asked you about your day already, and you answered.
Yeah.
Do you have a claim about the world, something that you think is true, that you'd be willing to have explored? I'll try to hear you out and not just argue.
Cool. I see by the picture in the corner that this is going to be the round Earth one. I'm a glober. I believe the Earth is a round, sphere-ish, bally thing that is spinning about once a day.
Okay, could I get your definition on that? What do you mean by a ball?
Well, in this case, a sphere with a radius of about 6,375 kilometers, if I remember right, but it doesn't have to be that precise. It's about 0.3% thicker in the middle because it's spinning.
Awesome, thank you. Could I hear some of your reasons for believing this?
Yeah, so I have a telescope, and no matter where I set it up, if I align the telescope to the spinning sky, and I can tell that that's true because then my pictures don't blur, then that means the telescope's pointing directly at our north or south pole. And I can always measure the angle of that relative to the ground, and it reads out in my latitude. That just always works. And I think that only always works on a round Earth that's spinning in the sky. And this is, of course, assuming that the sky is not rotating, which of course would require that it's breaking the speeds of light and, things like that. So I believe the sky is holding still.
Okay, let me paraphrase that back to you. So it sounds like you believe the Earth is a rotating ball. When you align your telescope with the rotation of the sky, the angle seems to always be level with your latitude?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Are there any methods or authorities that you have that sort of made you believe this claim?
Yeah. I mean, if that's all the information I had and I didn't have any countering information, I would be about, say, 95% confident. But I'm a lot more confident than that. And that's because I trust a lot of, astronomers and geographers and, all those people with ologies. And I trust them because I understand their epistemology. I understand how they use data to come to conclusions, and I trust their epistemology. So I don't actually have to have all their data and all their analysis to get me up to a parts per million of doubt.
Okay. Are there anything that could increase your confidence that the Earth is a ball?
Yeah, I could collapse that tiny bit of doubt, maybe by personal observation. Hey, Elon, if you'll send me up on the thing, I could become ever so slightly more sure. Maybe that kind of thing. That'd be fun. Hey, okay, I'm not gonna distract myself by trying to wave at Elon. Go ahead.
Okay, and is there anything that could move you down? What could you consider?
Yeah, I would consider any observation that was repeatable and objective that goes against the model, and that would send my confidence plummeting. Sorry, straight down. In fact.
Okay, well, I'd like to really thank you for the conversation. I enjoyed it, and I hope you did too.
Yes, thank you. So, did we get that done in like 5 minutes? Sometimes SE can be quite quick if critical thinking is prioritized and practiced by the person making the claim. May I have a volunteer from the audience to present the claim that humans evolved from filthy monkey men? Somebody willing to step up?
I can.
Sure, okay.
Go ahead, Josh.
Which one of you wants to go?
I'll do it. This will be
cool.
Yeah.
So, Josh, thank you for doing this thing. Do you have a claim for me?
Yeah, I think that that we as humans evolved over time from monkey men.
I heard from, and then it dropped out for me. Could you say that one again for me?
Evolved from monkey men.
Okay. So we evolved, and sometime in my ancestry, then you would look at some number of grades of my grandpa and say, "You're a monkey." Is that right?
Yeah, at some number of grades that they definitely exhibited much more monkey traits.
Do you have like an order of magnitude?
Almost
generations, the number of years or something.
It's almost an inconceivable order of magnitude.
Okay, so it's a really freaking long time.
Yeah.
Crazy long.
Yeah.
All right. So reasons supporting the claim. What reasons do you think? Or okay, first of all, did you always think that this was true?
No, I actually used to believe the opposite of this.
When you decided that it was true, what was the thing you learned last?
The thing that I learned last when my beliefs shifted.
Yes.
I would say the thing that I learned last probably had to do with the evidence for this being true, not only for myself being a descendant of monkey men, but also other species having similar
so you were convinced that other species evolved in a similar way, so it made it very easy to accept that we share a common ancestor with current monkeys or current apes.
Yes.
Depending on how far back we go, which branch on the family tree we're talking about. Okay.
Yes.
Cool. It was okay. So there, I think I said it back to you. Good. What do I need next on the chart? What does the chart say next? Did I paraphrase? Okay. So I'd like to ask, what authorities would you accept on the subject? Who do you trust?
I think I would prefer to trust groups or bodies of knowledge that could have spokesmen, but groups of people subject to scrutiny or bodies of knowledge subject to scrutiny.
Nice. Okay, that fits with my epistemology easy. So hypothetically, I haven't asked your confidence. How confident are you that this is true?
I would say I'm around 88% confident.
Okay. So I'm looking for what kind of data could move you to 90.
Something that could move me to 90. I don't know, because that's a lot of sureness. So I think I would be moved to a slightly higher level of confidence in my belief that we're evolved from monkey men. Maybe by the presentation of some sort of evidence that I hadn't heard of before.
Okay.
That seemed to me to really fit a spot.
Okay.
Yeah,
so relevant novel evidence.
Yes.
Cool. All right. That's good. How about down? What could make you expand that 12% of doubt?
I would say probably, honestly, strong or sound discreditation of a body of knowledge that helps to form my belief.
Okay. So if the scientific enterprise lost credibility in that area, that would be a thing that would push your confidence down.
Yeah, I guess it would have to be maybe its own piece of novel evidence therein being discredited. Yeah, and I think honestly about myself that sound or just strong discreditation of that would probably serve to widen that.
Okay.
Unsureness.
Thank you very much. I appreciate for the conversation. Have you had any shift in your confidence upon reviewing your reasons?
I don't think I've had a shift in my confidence, but I have had a real valuable reflection upon the scale by which I hold that.
Cool. A valuable reflection. Yeah, that's what we're after. This claim specifically is really likely to expose an unread library effect, because I think almost all of us in a room labeled with atheists, we almost all are probably evolutionists. But I suspect only a few of us can just rattle off like an Aaron Ra list of the credible reasons. And so the unread library is where you've taken a conclusion and you're not clear about the details leading into it. And that's totally fine. And what's really cool is you've got an 88% confidence, which is totally in line with what you should have if you don't know all the details. That's perfect. Thank you for that.
Such as, how can you be good without believing in a God? And until then, I hadn't really thought, well, I don't do anything with a God. And well, yeah, that doesn't make sense. And so I learned the language later and street epistemology, the language to discuss these topics.
When was that?
Later on, it became street epistemology is, I think, one of the better tools.
That's awesome. Yeah, when did you learn that? Like, when did you learn about the street epistemology tool?
3-4 years ago.
Okay. Yeah, you're in the game longer than I am, so I hope to learn something from you and anybody else here. And they're mostly online, like in comment sections, you said?
Yes, the posts below videos.
Okay. So you're like a YouTube comment section troll in a way?
Yeah, you could call me a troll. I try to be very polite and respectful, but I will make a comment that I think will create a response from theists, and it usually does. And then I try to develop the the conversation. Sometimes I have success, other times I do not. Sometimes the conversations can go on at a great for a great length of time, and
that's beautiful.
But
yeah,
well, it's all the while I'm evaluating how this thing is going, because it's a process, and I have a lot to learn. I've been doing this sort of thing for years, but I haven't always done it right. So I've had to study what my faults are and try my best to address them and get so that the conversations can last longer.
That's beautiful. I think that's a very virtuous pursuit. Thanks, James. Next, we've got Genevieve. Hi, Jen. Are you available to talk?
Oh, yes. Would you remind me what the prompt was?
Oh, it's just what is your name and how did you find out about street epistemology?
Yeah, I'm Genevieve. I found out about street epistemology 1 or 2 months ago. My mother started espousing some QAnon beliefs, and so I wanted to find a good way to talk to her about it, and someone sent me a link to a video on YouTube, and so through watching that, I ended up joining the Discord and have been practicing it. So someday I'll be strong enough to face my mother.
Oh, you haven't done it yet?
No, I did decide to come out as atheist to her last weekend, so I think that kind of threw a wrench in my QAnon talk plans. So,
what's your name on the Discord?
Fingerprints.
Oh, I've seen you there before. Yeah, I'm Near on the Discord. I don't know if anybody's seen me around. NEAR. I'm on less and less these days, but yeah, cool, awesome. I'd love to hear later how that conversation with your mom went. Sounds very interesting.
And I tend to like identify something pretty quickly, and I'm very direct. So what's really nice about, I guess, let's say when Matt Dillahunty on a good day, when he's able to gradually take someone through Socratic method, or, watching Anthony, the patience that they have and the way they gradually work through all the different questions and lead to a certain point. I want to work with that, because, for me, it would be a few questions and then, we're getting right to the point.
Right.
That kind of
I'm curious.
And sometimes people get like a little put off because, you identify, well, it sounds like this, and they're like, whoa, and they get defensive and maybe shut down.
Well, I'm curious, you said you are making an effort to like implement the method in your classroom, right? Has that been successful at all? Have you tried it at all yet? Or
yeah, well, I teach environmental education. I work with inner city at-risk youth at like nature centers. So it's smaller groups, and very often they're informal settings. So you can kind of go through that kind of dialogue. You have a little bit more free form.
Right. Okay.
Than, because I'm not in the classroom, or if I am, it's not a traditional setting. It's different. I work with trying to bring hands-on science activities and programs into the classroom.
Like labs mostly? Or?
Yeah, like that. Yeah, as experiential as possible. But in the process of that, there's just so many opportunities for lots of question asking. And
Could you give an example? I'm just curious. Like
example of what?
I guess what that looks like.
With
like
SE?
Yeah, like bringing something like street epistemology into a lab or something.
I don't know. The thing that I'm thinking of, no, it's okay. The thing that I'm thinking of, well, see, I'm working on it. Thing that I'm thinking of actually first was not actually a science thing. It was actually on the bus. I'm a ski coach, where the whole issue about the Confederate monuments came up. And it was actually a very religious, super religious kid who was just like, what's the problem with all this? And I'm just like, oh, and like
was this like back in 2018 or 17 when it was like still a pretty hot issue?
It was a couple years ago, right? Because he's graduated now from high school. And so it was a good opportunity to talk and ask questions about, well, how did you arrive at, this idea that you think that this is okay for these things to be up there, and so I mean, it was that kind of thing. Like I was able to sort of incorporate it there. Even though
awesome.
the other kids were there without that. So that works maybe better than science. Science, it's hard. I mean, sometimes I teach religious kids. Sometimes it's like a parochial school.
Mhm.
So that makes it interesting. I guess it comes in sometimes there when you get to the geology or evolution, you
Right.
know.
Yeah, that's when it
then-
gets a little
Right.
interesting,
And
yeah.
and so I've been able to sort of work it in there sometimes, just asking questions about that and getting them to sort of match up what their what we're doing and what their experiences are with you know, kind of assess that, put that next to whatever their ideology is.
And I wanted to first play the role of a questioner with anybody who is brave enough to make a claim, and we'll sort of go down the steps here. Does anybody have anything they think is true? Any claim they might want to have examined for this?
I can give you a false claim and you can examine it.
A false claim. So are you gonna like steel man it, like pretend to hold that?
Yeah, I'll pretend to hold that belief.
Okay.
Just for the sake of the exercise, I think I can do a good job of that.
Sure.
So the claim would be that the theory of evolution is flawed. And the reason, I'll even go as far as to give the reason, is because, I'll make this claim, the theory of evolution claims that life evolved from non-organic matter. And that is a false claim. It'll give somebody something to start with.
Okay. And so what you're saying is that it's illogical or perhaps irrational to believe that life came from non-organic matter. Is that the claim?
Yes, because as a theist, which I'm not, as a theist, I would claim that it's impossible for life to spring from inorganic matter.
Okay, got it. So just to break the fourth wall a little bit here, he's doing something called steel manning. You guys seem like you all sort of have been in the atheist / street epistemology community for a little while, probably longer than me, most of you. So I'm sure you know what it is, but just for redundancy's sake, he's pretending, in a sense. He's acting, he's making a claim that he doesn't really believe to be true, but he's doing his best to represent that claim. Now we're moving on to step 4. I'm curious, James, what you think evolution is. Like, what is your definition for evolution?
Well, evolution is a theory, and that scientists put forth to claim that human beings and all other animals evolved from rocks, and it contradicts God's truth that God created all life in a matter of days. And so as a theist, my church informs me that the scientists have a bias. They are atheists and they're prejudiced against religion because they want to undermine religion.
If our meaning for that statement is different, then I try to change up some of the words in order to convey either what I think that the statement might be meaning, or I get them to tell me what the exception to the rule is. So the first one I want to start with today is number 24. We're going to skip some of these today because we won't have time to do every single one in depth. Though 24 is a good place to start. it is possible that some of my beliefs are not true. Looks like everybody answered the same. I'm also in the strong agree. If someone doesn't agree to 24, what's a good first question to ask them?
How can you be confident that everything's true?
That's a good opener. Sure. Yeah. Maybe like, what do you mean by that? Though I'm wondering, for those that weren't in the strong agree, my open-ended question to you would be, what would we prefer statement 1 say? Is there a better way to consider something true than when it corresponds to reality?
Yes, I was questioning the definition of reality when I was looking at this question.
Okay. Yeah, in that instance, I would ask if we replace the word reality in number 1 to be the cosmos or universe, would a statement be true when it corresponds to the cosmos?
But we don't totally understand the cosmos. So.
Right.
I would say when it corresponds to justifiable proof.
Okay, that'd be a way.
Or verifiable.
Verifiable. That would be it sounds like a method to knowing the truth. Okay. This is essentially Anthony's tic-tacs question. Let's say you say that they're even and I say that they're odd. Before anyone counts them, is one of us correct and one of us mistaken? Before anyone knows about it?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And that's a good question to ask to see whether or not they think something corresponding is how they consider something true. Does anyone have any questions on how to ask questions about number 1? Or have you ever dealt with anybody who disagreed to number 1 in the past?
I think on my first attempt to do SE, I was doing it with my mother-in-law. And it was a very gentle approach. It wasn't even
You're
like
a brave man.
it wasn't even like I'm going to embark on an SE conversation. I just started asking some questions. And unfortunately, this was really early on from when I was introduced to it. So we didn't establish early on that definition of truth or reality. And the example I used was, would you agree there's an even or odd number of ice cubes in my Yeti? And she started moving the goalposts like crazy. Well, we couldn't know. And I wish that knowing now I wish I'd known then what I knew now as far as establish that quick.
Right. Also, it tends to, the thought experiment on counting things becomes more difficult when the thing in question is ice, because it might melt.
That was a point that was brought up, and my wife was like, okay, marbles.
Yeah. So one great way around that is talking about people. So you could say, would you agree that there's an even or an odd number of people on this Zoom call right now?
Yeah.
Because that might be a little bit more difficult to figure out, like where the dividing line between, an even or an odd number of people, like they're not going to divide it into halves. I've had people say, oh, there could be a speck of dust in your Tic Tac box. Are you going to count that? And so a good way around that whole problem is maybe talking about people or the number of chickens in my backyard, or, the number. We could go into ounces, like fluid ounces.
Right.
Though, see how that could be less clear. So I'd say the more clear the thing that we're counting, the more clear the thought experiment becomes. Yeah. Okay. Anything else on number 1 before we move on to number 2? Hey, Anthony. So number 2, we all share the same reality and only interpret it differently. All right. Let's say somebody disagrees to that. What could be a good question we can ask them? What's a good question we can ask them?
Can you think of things in the past that people have mostly agreed to that turned out not to be true, like the earth is flat?
Yeah,
So some people still
absolutely.
agree, but with that,
That's a great
the vast
question.
majority of people think, oh, surely that was a mistaken idea that we've all let go of.
Great question. Thank you, Caroline. Another question that we could ask?
Maybe, have you heard of any jury convictions that turned out to be false?
Ah, that one has some emotional attachment to the answer too. Yeah. Imagine you're on trial. Could the entire jury commit you and say that you're guilty and all be wrong? Is that possible? Or is that not possible? Good question. Yeah.
I think we have evidence, obviously, that it is possible.
Or does that make you guilty?
Right.
Is there something in which everyone agrees?
Is there something? Yeah. Now I can think outside the box on this one and say a definition for a word, maybe. Though even then, is it really true? Do we all have the same definitions for words? Let's see here. My question, and this is only if they're in strong agreement, if they really think it's very, very true that a statement is true if everyone agrees. My question would be, if everyone disagreed to the statement itself, would it no longer be true because everyone disagreed to it? Let's see what they think about that.
So you just go full opposite.
Right. This would be seeing whether or not there'd be a paradox here. if everyone agreeing is what dictates what's true. Or is it mind dependent or independent of minds? Yeah. Good question. All right. Any other things to talk about or bring up for number 5? Because number 5 comes up a lot in everyday conversation, in my experience here in Portland anyway.
I was just gonna say.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I know I put strongly disagree, but now I'm thinking about. I would say a lot of the information or opinions that I probably have is based on agreement between people more so than deeply knowing the knowledge I have.
Yeah.
Like we rely on textbooks, stuff like that.
Right.
And we're relying on the agreement between people and experts in the field, right?
It's easier, isn't it, to
I don't think that's so
believe
much
something that when everybody agrees.
Consensus.
Well, I can also see in a work situation, if you're working on a team and you know everybody agrees to do it one way and you don't think it's the right way.
Yeah, there's
But you
different ways
just
to
have
think
to go
outside the
along.
box on this one, and I would encourage you to go where your conversation partner is going and then ask questions that would bring you or draw you to their understanding. What questions could we ask that would convince you of what they're saying? Or what questions could we have to differentiate the exceptions to the rule for number 5, like a definition for a word, for example, to claims about reality, claims about our shared reality, like whether or not ghosts are real or something to that effect. Yeah. Okay. All right, moving on to number 6. And this one's more all over the map than most all other combined on the survey. I have a wide variety of answers, probably for number 6 more so than any other on the survey. Strong belief, even without action, can change external reality.
Things and variables involved with the application of this
Right,
question.
that would be a cumulative case, and we're taking out all the reasons and just looking at feelings alone.
Yeah, there was one time in the military where I had an extraordinarily strong feeling not to go out and film a civilian video, take a video of a civilian helicopter exercise. I had nothing else to go on. I was supposed to go out there, and I didn't go.
Right.
And it turned out to be 2 helicopters crashed into each other and killed 6 people.
Yikes. So Daniel, that would be more of an ought, I think. And I think what we want to know for the survey is, what is can we know what is with feelings?
I think
Like-
I think in a contextual circumstance, I think we could all think of things where we've gone on a gut hunch and been right about something, but it wasn't just the gut hunch. It was there were other contexts involved in that. So I think there is something to it. I wouldn't be completely dismissive of it, because let's be honest, if we believe something is true, it is emotionally satisfying, isn't it?
Right.
To
You
say,
and I,
yeah.
actually, Daniel, you and I would love to just go live after this workshop's over, if you want.
Sure, I have time.
Okay.
I have time.
Because I'll probably be down for that today. Let's move on to number 13. Believing something without evidence is admirable. Let's say somebody agrees. What's our first question? First question. And let's say we're only using the survey.
What's your definition of admirable?
Okay, sure. That's a good one.
If they felt strongly about it, they must have a reason. So I would say, what is it that you believe without evidence? What do you strongly believe that doesn't require evidence?
Who's next?
All right, I guess I can be next. I'm Pierce. I've been doing SE for about a year. I started out watching Anthony's videos like most people. And then I run a small, tiny YouTube channel that it's been fun doing SE on that.
Great. Thank you, Pierce.
And I'm Matt. I'm along with Diamond. We both frequent the Discord server. On there, I go by Matt Smith. It's a half pseudonym. But
Yeah.
I got into it maybe, I don't know, last October, September timeframe. Kind of the same thing as Diamond said. I felt a lot of concerns about the rising polarization, and I was recommended that book, the orange book, How to Have Impossible Conversations. I read that book and it completely changed my thinking on how to even have conversations or what we're even trying to do. And after that, I started, obviously I watched some videos and I couldn't believe what I was seeing, it kind of was real striking. And then that I wanted to practice myself, so I got involved in Discord. I've been doing that for many months now. And I've been also like engaging, friends and acquaintances of mine, not, like if there are things we disagree about, I use a lot of the techniques to kind of keep it productive, and not let it get into an out of hand situation,
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And for anyone who didn't know about how to have impossible conversations, it's the second Peter Boghossian's book about street epistemology, and I also highly recommend it. And it's the better one out of the two, I would say. All right, so I'll read another second question probably. How to handle cases where your interlocutor rejects the premise of a hypothetical or a thought experiment? I have an example. Okay, Matt, you have an example? Go ahead.
Yeah, this happened. I was having actually a religious discussion with a acquaintance of mine, and we were having very deep discussion. It was very good, and basically we got to the point where she shared that the main reason she believes is that she had a personal religious experience when she was young, where she saw God, and so it was very good. I got that reason, and then I started gently asking, well, if hypothetically, if God were not to have exist, what might explain that? And she wouldn't even entertain the hypothetical. She's like, well, that's impossible, right? And
Yeah,
actually, this
it
was many months ago. Now I may have some ideas on how to handle that, but at the time I wasn't sure how to handle it.
Yes, it's a great question and a very difficult case. It happens. So before I answer, I invite others to join in on thinking how to handle this case. So I'll repeat what I've heard. if we invite our interlocutor to contemplate a thought experiment, we say, like, let's imagine God didn't exist. How could we know that? Or any other analogous question. And they just do not agree to contemplate on such hypothetical. They say, well, how can I assume that God doesn't exist? Because if I know that he does, what do we do?
I would suggest the Billie Holiday approach, where you take some other example and say, okay, let's say this other person believes Billie Holiday is God, and then play out the scenario in the example of Billie Holiday. That's taken from the Being Reasonable podcast. Mark Solomon's does that kind of thing a lot.
Yeah, you're talking about, I think it's Buddy Holly is the example he uses.
You're absolutely right. Thank you. Buddy Holly.
You know, I've thought about that though. I've listened to that podcast, and I think that can actually come across as a little bit condescending if you're talking about someone's deeply held belief.
Guys, for the rest of us to understand it more clearly, could you phrase the question in its entirety, if you don't mind?
Yeah, so Mark Solomon frequently, when he runs into an example like this, he'll say, well, imagine I believe that Buddy Holly is a god. I don't know if you know this, Buddy Holly is a kind of famous singer from 60, 70 years ago. And I believe he's a god, and I believe he died, and now he has positive impacts in my life. And but let's say hypothetically he's not a god. What would you recommend I do to find out? Like he'll ask questions like that, which I think are good. I just worry about trying to compare someone's, God to like a famous singer. I think it can come off the wrong way sometimes.
Well, I think you can use like the same scenario with perhaps like a Hindu god, like Vishnu or something. I think the same thing works there, and perhaps it's a little bit more respectful.
Yeah, I tried the outsider test for faith, and that didn't work either. But
yeah, I agree that probably comparing it to a Hindu god is a little bit can seem a little bit less condescending than comparing it to some person, like a human being. And yeah, so basically the outsider test, for those of you who don't know, is we take the same methods that our interlocutor is using, and we conduct a thought experiment where they're using this same method, and they come to different, maybe contradictory conclusions to what you are coming to. And that would also be my main advice in this case, I would say, because what I think about when I hear such a thing, that I would not like to contemplate that God doesn't exist, I think to myself, okay, that person is using a method of assuming they know the truth, right? They just assume they know the truth, and they don't even want to hear anything else. So can a person use this method and come to a incorrect conclusion? I would say yes. So that's what I would like to ask them, and I would like to ask them, would they invite other people to use the same method when they come to conclusions not only about God, but about anything else? If it's only about God, what's the difference? How can we know when should we use such a method and when we shouldn't use such a method? And even if it's only about godlike beliefs, let's assume another person uses the same method and they assume that a lot of pagan deities are real, and instead of Christian God, for example, and they just they are confident about it, 100%. So how can we think about things like that? How do we know which one of you is more correct? That would be my main advice as well. The outsider test is one of our most frequent tools in such cases.
So I think you skipped the step of asking them what the method is. You have to make sure I want to know what that is.
I don't think that we should always ask what your method is, because probably our interlocutors are not using the word method as we're using it, but we definitely want to just reiterate what we've heard and confirm that we understood it correctly. So we can just say, did I hear you correctly that you just assume that God exists and you would not even contemplate that that he might not exist? And that's how you think about it. If they say yes, then sure. If you can attempt asking further questions like, but what led you to this belief? Like, did something happen that led you to this belief? And if that didn't happen, would you still have this belief? Dealing with complex scientific claims that may rely on understanding beyond the questioner's expertise. This is a very important consideration as well. So I'll try to briefly answer it. And I have, I think, two things to say. First, the beauty of street epistemology is that we don't even have to be experts at what we're discussing. We're just discussing methods. And when we're talking about methods, it doesn't matter whether we know anything about the belief itself, whether we're experts, because methods are just listen to authority or listen to scientific consensus or getting it from some literature. Things like that are methods. And we use them to come to conclusions, right? So that's one thing I would like to say. You don't have to be expert. You just proceed with discussing how they approach, even if they are referencing scientific studies that are difficult for you to process. You can just either get content with that if you think their reasoning is pretty reliable, or you can proceed asking questions like, how do you tell which scientific study is more reliable? If different scientific studies show different results, how do we go on about thinking about that? Questions like that could also be asked. That's one way to do it. And another way is, another thing I wanted to say is probably even more important, is take it as a chance to learn yourself, something new for yourself. If you're not experts and your interlocutor shows some interesting stuff and they're telling you something that you're not an expert in, but you think you should be, take it as a challenge and take it as a learning experience for yourself and not for your interlocutor. Go ahead and ask them to send you a link to a great article or a scientific study and just read it for yourself. Thank your interlocutor for being such a great assistant for your learning. That would be enough.